Welcome to today's shiur, Baruch HaShem, for the Mezuza Tovos, which we heard from the Middle East. I think so. If you can join me, though, in saying a capital Tehillim for the welfare and safety of Klal Yisrael, both in Eretz Yisrael and, for that matter, the Jewish community in Iran too, should we all be protected and be safe. So if you can join me, I'd like to say capital Kuf Chof Aleph in Tehillim. So Shir Hamalis LeDavid. Sorry. Shir Lamalos Eso Einai Elohorim Me'ayin Yovo Ezri Me'im Adinoi Yosei Shomayim Va'oretz. Al Yetein Lamet Raglecho Al Yonum Shemrecho. Hine Lo Yonum Lo Yishon Shemei Yisrael. Adonai Shemrecho Adonai Tzilcho Al Yad Yeminecho. Yoimum Hashemesh Lo Yakecho Yoreach Baloilo. Adonai Yishmorcho Mikol Ro Yishmeres Nafshecho. Adonai Yishmor Tzesecho Vayecho Me Atov Ad Olam. Just was reading today, there's a publication called Kikorov, and they had there an interview with a current shliach in the Principality of Andorra, Rebbe Kostiel Kalman's son, and he tells the following, that before this he was a shliach in a city in China. Don't ask me to pronounce the name of the place. And he was always worried that they won't let him back into the country. So he stayed as long as he could. And then he would write to the Rebbe regularly. Whenever he had a challenge, whether it was a health challenge or in fundraising or whatever, maybe he would write to the Rebbe, and he would send off the letters right away. But he kept copies. And then periodically, when he traveled to New York, he would take all of those tetlach, all his letters, and read them at the Ohel. And so he had now, after a prolonged stay in China, he comes to the Rebbe with a whole pack, about 6 months, a year's worth of papers and of letters which he'd written to the Rebbe. And he's standing by the Ohel, reading them one by one, and how he described this challenge, and how then he starts realizing one by one, each of those challenges were resolved in a Lamaila in an amazing way, unexpected ways. And he saw Poshet systematically, one after the other, all of his. And when he realized that, he said, I broke down crying to realize how everything has been, all the brachas which I asked for have been fulfilled. I just say this story in connection with my recollection from the Gulf War, which is 91, I think. And then the chaplain, Rabbi Yaakov Goldstein, had asked the Rebbe something about taking a Megillah or something, whatever it was, and the Rebbe had said somewhere a few weeks earlier that by Purim will be over. I used to have a fabrengen every Purim night in my house, and I remember 3 o'clock in the morning, or 4 o'clock in the morning, whatever, as I'm cleaning up after everyone has finally left, and they turned on the radio to hear that Saddam Hussein has been finished off, or whatever it was, whether it was captured. I don't even remember the detail, or that they had surrendered. It was that they had surrendered. So the war was over on Purim, and so Ken Yevdu Kol Oivecho, and we should see just Ach Toiv Chesed V'Yidden, and should we see a Geula Shlema with Mashiach Tzidkenu B'Karev. Let's go to our questions. So here's something very interesting. Last week, somehow, we spoke about Machatzis haShekel, and someone brought to my attention, actually it's my son-in-law in Australia, he brought to my attention that there's a Sikha of the Rebbe, which I was unaware of, about Machatzis haShekel, to encourage to the parents. This is from Chof Dalad Adar Rishon Tov Shin Nun Beis. This is 3-4 days before the struggle for this land. Sometimes you have Lamed Ayin, and it stands for Loy Oleinu and Loy Atop. Net eingedacht and niet gedacht. Anyway, so the Rebbe says the following. This is towards the end of the Sikha, as a Sikha on a Thursday night. How appropriate it would be if the children would be mechanech the children to give also the 3 machzos haShekel from their own money, but often in a way that the parents will help them, that the children should be able to give their machzos haShekel in a way of harchava, in a way of feeling comfortable about this, affluent way, and they should have enough money left over for their own personal needs, so then they don't feel that lacking anything. That's the Rebbe's message. So again, it's hayra l'maisa. Yeah, for years I used to give machzos haShekel for my children. Now my daughter asked me, do I have to do it, or does she have to do it herself? So I answered 3 letters DIY. She's old enough to do it herself, but so long as I would do it in the shul. Well, here the Rebbe is giving a hayra that parents should give the children the money, and the children should give the machzos haShekel themselves. But then here's another addition, to give them more money, so that they should feel when they're giving the money, they shouldn't feel that they're going to be missing out on their needs. Now I want to go through into this a little bit more, because I think there's a very interesting lomdus here. Here's you can see on the Mishnah on the top here. Now, this is from the Mishnah in Shkolim. Earlier on, it has in the Mishnah about a father, if he started giving chatzi shekel for his son, he should not stop. And that was what we meant to discuss last week. The Lashon in Kitzur Shulchan Aruch was ad li'olam, and whereas the Rambam adds ad sheyagdil. And so this is a little bit further in the same Perek, in Perek Aleph of Shkolim, that although women and avodim aktanim ein memashkenim, we would not take, if they haven't given their machzos haShekel, we wouldn't take a deposit, a security from them. That's on the other side, on the one side. Im shoklu, however, if they did offer, mekablim miyodon, the shkolim are accepted from them. Now here's a very interesting question. There's a chiyuv of machzos haShekel in every male adult, and you can't give more and you can't give less. It's a half shekel. So voluntary, so today I'm feeling a good mood, I'm going to give a double. No, it's just a machzos haShekel. So how did it come into this that there are voluntary machzos haShekels? That was bothering me. How could there be voluntary machzos haShekel? Now, going back earlier in the Mishnah, there's a debate, Machlokes Tanoim, whether the Kohanim are obliged to give machzos haShekel or not. So on Ben Bukhari, he says the Kohen don't have to give machzos haShekel. They're providing services, yeah? But if they did, mekabel mehen. The other one says no, on the contrary. The Kohanim do have to give machzos haShekel. But because they provide services, therefore they didn't take a mashkan, didn't take a security if they didn't give it. Either way, but according to the one who says that Kohanim don't have to give machzos haShekel, so the question is, so then if they give a contribution, it's like a korban yochid, kind of. It's not their, it doesn't become part of the pool of the machzos haShekel money because it's voluntary money. So the Gemara answers that they give it, the Kohanim give it, moisri letzibur yofer yofer. So moisri letzibur yofer yofer. That the Kohen, although he thinks it's voluntary, fine, but when he gives it wholeheartedly, and so he relinquishes any personal ownership. It's not a korban yochid, but it becomes part of the tzibur. So therefore, it follows that the same thing when it comes to when noshim avodim uktanim, when they give their half shekel, they also have to give it yofer yofer. They have to, because otherwise you have this problem. It's private money mixed in with the communal chest. No, so here you have Rebbe Kiva Eger on the Mishnah. on the margins of the Mishnah, of the big Mishnayos, you have the comment of Reb Kiva Eger. But actually, this comment is quoting from the Ksos HaChoshen. So it said until, if they're giving under the age of 13, yeah, when it says that if they do offer mekablin miyodom, now a child is not min haTorah, a child is not eligible to give a gift. So if so, male the women who give Moishulat Siba Yofa Yofa, but a child is not recognized as being able to give a gift. So he answers, since there is something called Peutos, which means that from the age of about 6, depending on their capability, a child's gift is recognized midrabanon. The child can sell things, and that's the sale midrabanon. The sale is counted. And therefore, Havi Momen Gomor now is leapfrogging from a drabonon ability to give a gift. It becomes a Momen Gomor even for din doiraisa. So here's a very interesting leap, that having recognized that the child is able to give a gift midrabanon, now we're saying his gift is going to have a validity even for din doiraisa, and therefore it can become part of the Machatzis HaShekel fund to fund the shkol. He brings here a parallel. There is if a person owes, there's a concept. If Reuven owes Shimon and Shimon owes Levi, so Levi can go to Reuven and collect the debt, and that's called shibuda de Reb Nosson. Now, if that's a din rabbonon, that the A owes B and B owes C, so C can go to A and take the money. If somehow this was utilized for kiddushin, the kiddushin is valid, even though it wasn't given directly, and in Torah it's not considered being given, but in Rabbanon it is. And so you have here a very interesting phenomenon, that a gift which is recognized with Rabbanon achieves kiddushin, which is a din min Torah. So the same thing he wants to use here, that the children give a gift, and it's recognized with Rabbanon, and it's also recognized with Torah, which is a very interesting, it's very exceptional development. Meanwhile, thinking, why is it that a child cannot give a gift? A child doesn't have the finality, and he doesn't understand finality. She doesn't matter. They don't understand, I've given it away, and tomorrow, if you give away your toy, tomorrow it's not yours. You can't ask for it back. The child doesn't see that. They see, I give it and I can still get it back. So possibly, this is my hypothesis. The Rebbe is saying here, I want to encourage the children to give Machatzis HaShekel. But if the child gives it with, perhaps with misgiving, that he thinks, I'm giving it away, I won't be able to buy candies. So he hasn't given it away wholeheartedly. Now, I'm not talking here Halocho, because we're talking not about the minig Machatzis HaShekel. We're not talking about Machatzis HaShekel, which is a din in the Mishnah. So there, it's obviously a much stricter halacha, and there you might say it's only pu'utos from the age of 6. Here the Rebbe is talking about younger children also, but here the Rebbe is saying, make sure that the child should not feel begrudging to give away the money. In this way, his gift is recognized as it can be a valid gift. It's given away wholeheartedly, and therefore it's valid. Okay, so that's my speculation in not only the compassionate Zaidi attitude, give the child a little bit more, but actually an element halacha. If you give a child something and you want them to give tzedakah, but give them a bit more, then they should feel comfortable about giving away the tzedakah. Meanwhile, as you can see, I was intrigued about this concept of children being able to give Machatzis HaShekel. So I wanted to trace a little bit more on the validity of this. If you remember last week, I was medayek in the Rambam, the Loshen, that it's a mitzvah which is voluntary, but it becomes you enter into that room, it's as if you entered a mitzvah in Torah. That was my dear Loshen Rambam. At any rate, so I was looking around, so I took up the Encyclopedia Talmudis under Machatzis HaShekel, and it says Ein Oich Shkolim. So, for your information, for Encyclopedia Talmudis, I've got about 50 volumes, and they're still up for halfway through. They're in the middle of Ois Mem. So Shkolim is another 30 volumes ahead, which hasn't been published yet. But I did find in the back of the Rambam, in Frenkel's Rambam, so he has the Mafteach of Sforim, which talk about the Rambam, and there he brought me to this Reikeach. So the Reikeach is from the period of the Balei HaTosfos, and he writes the following. This is about the mitzvah of Shkolim, not about the Machatzis HaShekel, which we do nowadays, not about the minig Machatzis HaShekel. He brings a koton shehiskil oviv lishkel al yodai. Einoi poisei. This is the Mishnah, which says the father had started. He continues next year also. Vishvil lechanchoi b'mitzvahs. Halocho keshehevi beisayros. The fact that the father continues year after year until the child becomes of age is lechanchoi, which is an interesting concept here, because the other Meforshim struggle. Because the father gave Machatzis HaShekel last year, who says he has to give this year? So they say, so he says mitzad chinuch. Others say it's a form of neder, similar to another type of practice. We know that if you started doing a minhag toiv and with the intention to continue doing so, it becomes a neder. And here he brings in a concept of lechanchoi, which I find interesting because the father is giving the Machatzis HaShekel. Where's the chinuch? Where's the child involved? It looks like what the Rebbe is suggesting. You want to be mechanech the child? Well, bring the child along. Whether you give the child the money in his hand or you make the child aware, Tatala, I'm giving this on your behalf. The child should be involved in the giving of the Machatzis HaShekel, not that he's totally unaware about it. So that's a support in a sense to what the Rebbe is saying. The Rekeach says already that this father giving is lechanchoi b'mitzvahs. The fact that other poskim say it's got to do with neder nishkan stira. The motive here is lechanchoi b'mitzvahs. And then once you've done it, then it becomes a chiyuv to continue doing so in subsequent years. Okay, let's go on. That was about Machatzis HaShekel. Now, about Shabbos Zochor, Parshas Zochor. And so the question is, should one be trying to get your own pronunciation? Or is it okay? I actually got a call on Friday. I was sitting in the Beis HaRoah, Bochas from a Chassidish background. If he hears a Litvish reading, is he Yoitze? So I said, you are Yoitze, but there is a preference to go to your own Havara. So here you have from Nitzi Gabriel. The Chatchila one should be Makbid Ashkenazi, should be Yoitze, should avoid being Yoitze from a Sefardi pronunciation, or Sefardi from Ashkenazi, but Minhadin, you're Yoitze anyways, because Elo ve'elo divrei lekib chaim, all the forms of pronunciation are valid. So there's a preference to keep to your minhag, but it's not me'akiv. Someone asked me on the last week to hear nearby. He has a Sefardi shul. To hear Ashkenazi shul, you'd have to walk half an hour or more. I don't know whether you're mechuyev to go such a long distance, but there's a lechatchila preference. Okay, let's move on. So someone sent me, as you can see on the screen, sent me this picture of a Mezuza-holder. And for those who are not following with the screen, it's got a wooden kind of bracket on top and wooden bracket on the bottom, which have holes, probably halfway through. And then there's a test tube where the mezuzah is placed in the test tube. That protects it from the elements, and it's then held in place by this bracket on top and the bottom. But between the mezuzah and the wall, there's, I can see here, probably about half an inch or more. So here's the shiur. Is that valid? So this is not such a new thing, and it is discussed in various. You have on the screen from the Sefer Seichel Toiv. He brings, some say it is okay because it is fixed there. There is another variation on this. What would happen if you have a tube which is fixed to the wall, but it's got to open at the top? And you could just put your finger in, or with a tweezers, and you could pull the mezuzah out. So the mezuzah is sitting safe. It's not falling down, but it's not tight. No, you don't need any tools. Even that, some of them say that is okay, but others are not so happy about it. I'm talking back to the where there is a gap. So some say it's not mamish on the doorposts. It should be fixed on the doorposts. There are those who say because there's a gap of air, of space in between, it's not called kavua on the door frame. Now, what you see here on the picture is quite exaggerated. For years, I had the other type, which is we can see in the small diagram. Also, the same idea, but there's very little space between the test tube and the wood. But once I saw this issue, I phased those out because there is a concern of the gap. I actually once had a visit here, Rebbe Dayan Levi Yitzchok Raskin from Arad. He came to London fundraising, whatever. He saw these mezuzahs. He was me'orer that there's a shaila. Eventually, I changed them. Is a shaila of this, the avi being a hefsek. Meanwhile, someone asked me on Friday, what about when you have a mezuzah case? And he says that his sofer wrapped the mezuzahs very tight. And so they sit inside the mezuzah case very comfortably. There's like more space than necessary. Is that a problem? Is there any need for the mezuzah to be stiffly fitting in the mezuzah case, or could it be lots of room inside? So according to what I'm seeing here, it is okay. There's no need to start putting stuffing or something. If it's safe and it's a screw on top and screw at the bottom, or nail on top, nail at the bottom, you won't be able to take the mezuzah out without tools, then I don't see any shaila from what I'm seeing over here. That would be a valid kavias. It's called kavua. The fact that you need tools to remove it, that means that the way it is kavua, and that's the mitzvah. And that's the see Chazal. They instituted the brocha likaboya mezuzah to indicate that the mezuzah should be in a way that it's kavua. Right. Let's move on. So here's an interesting question. This is on the screen. Is a perhaps I don't know what it's called. It's a like a brush, a interdental brush. So you have a plastic stick, which is let's say 3 inches long, and at the top there's a wire sticking out, and the wire is surrounded with bristles, and it's made to be able to put between your teeth to clear out any particles of food, etc. The wire tends to bend itself. If it's and the question that he was asking is, are you allowed to straighten this brush on Shabbos? Is that called fixing or not? Now, it does say clearly in Shulchan Aruch in Siman Shin Mem. Siman Shin Mem is I would perhaps call miscellanea, all bits and pieces of various malachas. And one of them is, it says there, if a needle is bent out of shape and you straighten it, then you are in violation of tikkun keli of makir b'patish. Similarly, if you had left a pair of glasses on a couch and someone sat down on them and then they're bent out of shape and you straighten the frame that you should be able to wear them, that would definitely be also the same thing as tikkun keli, which could well be an isum Torah. So here's the question: straightening such a brush, is that included in? Is that permitted or not? So what you have on the screen is from Piskat Shuvas, from Siman Shin Mem, and we'll read it carefully. From the above discussion, we'll conclude about a pair of glasses, and he goes into whether it's the handles, whether the frame, or the aponim. For those who don't know, I once discovered aponim is the things which fit on the nose, the little bits. I don't know what they're called in English. These things which the cushions on your of the glasses onto the nose, uh, if they get, now then he goes on, if it's a knife or a spoon or a fork, a pin, safety pin, keys, if they have become bent out of shape, even if they are still usable, you should not be straightening them to make them back the way they should be. But then he says the following: if it is mutsu, if it's common that this thing bends out of shape, and they are straightened easily, without any effort, and therefore, for example, a plastic cup, if it's bent out of shape, to make it straight again, then he says not a problem. For example, if your hat got out of shape, someone bashed your hat and you make it back again. So he says that's not a problem because he says it's no tircha, it's straightened out easily without effort, and possibly also the fact that it's common that it gets bent out of shape, that adds to it. So I think all of those criteria will apply to this interdental brush. It's motsui, it does get bent out of shape. That's definitely the case. It's very common that it gets bent out of shape. And to straighten it is very simple. Just with between your fingers, you get to straighten it. So then it would be okay. Right. Let's move on. We have now question number 5, and that's does putting dashes in middle of Hashem's name, Yud Kei Vav Kei, for example, does that resolve that's not a problem of Kedushas Hashem as far as Shemus is concerned, etc. So let's read this is from a Sefer called Ginzei HaKodesh, Hamafrid Bein Oisius Shem Havaya, one who divides the letters with a hyphen, that does not exempt it from Geniza, from Shemus. Others say that it does. By the way, it's relevant to today's shiur Rambam Gimel Prokim, talks about the Birchas Koyanim, about the Koyanim in the Beis Hamikdash would pronounce the Shem HaMeforos, Yud Kei Vav Kei, the way it's written. There is the Lashon HaHoige es Hashem Ba'osi Yoso, one who utters the Hashem's name with the letters. And this is understood, Tosfos understands this, that even if you don't pronounce oi, but you just say yud and then a hey and then a vav and then a hey, that is also considered a violation of uttering Hashem's name, which is indeed when we say the Shem Yichud before Baruch She'omar, the Hashem Yud Kei Vav Kei. So I was taught as a child, and I believe that's the general minhag. We don't say yud and then a hey, we say Yud Kei Vav Kei. And that is because saying the Yud Kei Vav Kei, even just the letters, is by name, is also considered uttering Hashem's name, Yud Kei Vav Kei, which we don't have permission to do so. So, therefore, the 4 letters, so we have here then, we have 2 opinions about whether hyphenating Hashem's name will absolve it from having Kedushas Hashem. The first approach is Machmir. The second approach is Mekil. It does allow it, especially when it comes to if it's written in a different language. So we're all familiar that instead of G-O-D, we write G-D, and that's to avoid the paper having Kedushas Hashem. And so it seems to be that, I believe, the general minhag, that is the fact. The widespread minhag is to write Aleph Lamed with a hyphen and, let's say, in invitations. Chabad invitation, the 4th paragraph, starts off with a Hakel Hatov. I know in the Rebbe's invitation it was written without the hyphen. That's another discussion. But generally, when people send out invitations, so the Aleph Lamed should have a hyphen, because otherwise it's going to be the invitation can be thrown in the bin afterwards. So it's to avoid the Kedushas Hashem. This is certainly the common minhag, to put hyphens to absolve to avoid having Kedushas Hashem. It's, as you see, it's not unanimous. Okay. Okay, this next one is very interesting. To a Purim Shaila. So you have here Gemara in Megillah, Zayin Amid Beis, and there's two Chachamim, one sent Shlachmanas, one to the other. And one sent like nice chunks of meat or flanken, whatever it was. And the other one sends back Mole Taska de Zangvila, a tub full of ginger, or Mole Koso de Pilpal to Aricha, and a full cup of long peppers. And so, okay, so he sent Shlachmonas, he sent ginger and pepper. So you have here a sefer called Reach Dudoim, which I wasn't aware of. There's a famous Bnei Yissaschar. He was a great nephew of Rebbe Milizhensk, and he's called Tzvi Elimelech of Dineveh. And as I say, his most famous name is Sefer Bnei Yissaschar, but he has a sefer on Maseches Brochus, and he has a sefer on Megillah, Maseches Megillah, called Reach Dudoim. So this I saw, he writes the following: Nishma. From here we come this story with the ginger and the pilp and the pepper, with even things, foods which are not edible on their own. Only it's used to enhance another food. You have, let's say, a grain, a tub of grain. You don't know eats grain by the spoonful. You have fish, you have a grain or mustard, etc. You might have thought monos means it has to be edible on its own. And so you see here that he sent a tub of zangvil, of ginger. And this was his lachmanas. Well, he sent two foods, yeah, it's ginger and pepper. So so this becomes very interesting that your yotzes lachmanas also with a seasoning or something, yeah. So how much? So here the Pri Megadim actually says, "B'mashal lifton kechaymetz shashiur kafi suda beinin is hativ." The amount which you'd have for one meal. So I put on the list of questions just to be current a piece of sushi and wasabi, or it could be the same thing. Chips, which American call French fries, and a sachet of no ketchup. So then it would be a lifton. So then it's considered two foods. I was very surprised. More common, a tub of hummus. Also, hummus people don't eat a hummus by the spoon. You have it with other foods. So a tub of hummus together with challah, let's say, would be a yotze, a shtei bonus. Now, this I was intrigued about this idea that even a very small amount should be enough. So I'm looking in the parallel in Halocho in Eruv Tafshilin. Eruv Tafshilin, you have to use a cooked food. Can be also. So now we have in Tovkov Chav Zayin, says, if you have just the fat which is stuck to the knife. So you have a knife which was used for cutting meat, and now there's fat is stuck to the knife. So then you scrape it off the knife, and you can use it for an Eruv Tafshilin. But then he adds him yesh boy kazayis. So it looks like, I mean, no one eats fat by the spoonful. So fat would be used together with other foods. And still, for Erev Tafshilin, the insistence is there has to be a kazayis. And therefore, coming back to Shlachmonas, I find it interesting why the Pri Megadim is satisfied with a quantity which is enough for one meal serving, even though it's obviously less than a kazayis. So, all right, listen, this is all a nice theory. Lepoil, I think the Olam gives much more generous Shlachmonasen, and therefore it's just the Pilpula Bialma. But what is very important to know that cellophane is not ma'akiv. The yotze, even without cellophane, I think actually cellophane's become outmoded. Now there's new fashions, but fine. Right. Uh, okay. Someone brought to my attention the following. This is from the Rambam from this past week. We at the end of Aleinu, we say 4 psukim, Altiro, Utsu Eitzo, and then Azikno, and then Altiro. So Altiro in Asida, you take a look, it says it was introduced by the Rashal, the Kosovo Rashal, Shlomo Luria. But the psukim Altiro, where does it come? There's meaning of saying those psukim of Altiro. So this is from my Siddur, quoting for the Shara Koilo, quoting from Reb Shlomo Alkabetz in his Sefer Mones Halevi. So this is contemporary of this is the Baal Chodoidi. He has a commentary on the Megillah Esther, and he quotes from Rabbi Yehuda Ibn Sosin, Shekein Noagu Anche Provencia. The people of Provence would say every day at the end of the davening. So it's a very Purim relevant. It's very, very relevant to Purim because the story with Mordechai, and you find 3 children, and one says Altira, the other one says Utsa Esau, the third one says Vazikno. Okay, so fine. So he's saying that this is what we have, that it's attributed to the Anshe Provencia, to say those psukim. Now, what we have here on the screen is from the Sefer HaMenucha. Now, this is also in the newer Rambams. In the Frankel Rambam, you have a commentary called Rabbeinu Monoyach. It's the same Sefer. So I got it here from an earlier publication called Sefer HaMenucha, but it's there in the Rambam in Perik, the beginning of Perik base of Hilchas Tefillah, which we learned this past week. And it says there, it's talking about the institution of the Brocha V'Olam Al Shinim, the Birchas Haminim. And it has that they came at a time that they were suffering so much from these heretics, Tzedukim, Baitusim, etc. So they instituted a tefillah, another brocha, that they should be whatever, they should no longer be able to cause harm. V'im toimar. So the questions then asks, why do you pray for them to be weakened? Why don't you pray that they should do tshuva? As we have the story of Beruria, the wife of Reb Meir, and in the case of Reb Meir, there were those louts, Beryoini, who were harassing him, and he was going to say a prayer to punish them. And she said, you should pray that they should do tshuva, because it says, Yitamu chatoim v'leichotim, and it says, G'onosh l'tzadik lo toiv. It doesn't, it's not becoming for a tzaddik to mete out punishment. V'yeshloima, he says, the kavonas habrocha is if at the moment when they are poised to cause damage to Yidden, harm to Yidden, that's when they should be punished. They should be eliminated. Or bashir mizmor nami, amrinon yiboshu vibolu adei ad. V'hiskinu acharei posuk utsu eiso v'sufor. Now, this is alluding to a Sefardi Sheminik in some communities back then, that they would, after davening, they would say chapter Pei Gimel of Tehillim, which is all about the enemies rising and poised to harm, and it finishes off the Yeveshu v'yibalu adei ad. They should be embarrassed and they should be shocked, and very, very appropriate for current time. And then after that, they would say Utsu Esav V'Sufer. So we have an old Sefardi Sheminik of saying after davening chapter 83 of Tehillim, and following which to say the posuk Utsu Esav V'Sufer, which is from a different place altogether, different Sefer Bichlal. So we have here an early source of saying Utsu Esav V'Sufer after davening. Interesting. Rabbeinu Manoach lived in Narbonne, as you can see here. Manoach ben Yaakov in Narbonne. Narbonne, technically today, is not part of Provence, but I checked on Google. It's not that far, and is known as Vichachme Provencia. So here we're seeing something which is from the time of the Arizal, quoting Rebbe Ben Sosin, that it's a minig of Anshe Provence. And now we're finding Rabbeinu Manoach, who is probably a couple of centuries earlier, where he does say there's this minig of saying just Utsei Sevasufa. We don't have the other two psukim, but interesting to note that. Fine. What's the next thing? Yeah, that's number 7, number 8. Right, so I'll see where I have sources for this. In Parshas Zochor, I got a call on Friday about a very sweet shliach somewhere in Eretz Yisrael, and he's on a shliach in a moshav. He doesn't expect to get a minyan Shabbos morning. So he's asking, could he do Kriyas Parshas Zochor in the afternoon? He'll probably be able to get a minyan. Could he do Parshas Zochor in the afternoon? So I looked around. At first I was going to say no, but then before pressing the no button, I decided to look around. And actually I was pleasantly surprised to see that several poskim say it is okay. Dr. Gabriel says it's okay. Let's say if you had a community, they had forgotten that it's Shabbos Zochor. So they just did Parshas Tetzaveh. Then afterwards, they realized, oh, it's Parshas Zochor. So they say that you can take out a Sefer Torah and read Parshas Zochor. And even with a bracha, I was very surprised. So the Piskei Teshuvos brings from the Tzitz Eliezer that it is okay. But then he brings from Rav Wozner and Shevet HaLevi, it's not okay. But it's good to look up these things, because when you see in the Shevet HaLevi, he says, who are these people? Well, they didn't come in the morning for Kriyas Torah. There's Zochar Chevre, let them wait for Purim, let them wait for Parshas Kiseitze. Or Bichlal, he kind of lashes out. And obviously, if that's the reason, it's more an attitude issue. And therefore, I wrote back to the guy, yes, you can do it. Now, what bothered me, well, if you remember, we had a discussion a few weeks ago about Kriyas HaTorah of Shabbos morning. It can be done a whole day long. Yeah, there was Noida Behuda, Dr. Mervova, that he said that the Kriyas HaTorah of Shabbos morning is Kol HaYom Zmano. So Shabbos Zochor is all the way till it's still Shabbos Zochor. What bothered me was, where do you find that you do a Kriyas HaTorah with one single aliyah? I know that places they do a Kriyas HaTorah in the afternoon for women. I'm sure they just do it with a Sefer Torah without a bracha. But with a bracha, I didn't. And so then I saw that Tzitz Eliezer, he says, yes. You see, on Yom Kippur, the Kohen Gadol is the only one who has an aliyah, and he learns from the Torah with brachas before and after. And similarly on HaShekel, the Melech says the bracha before and after. So you see here two precedents for a Kriyas HaTorah of a Yochid, of one person, of course, a prominent Yochid. But the idea of having a Kriyas HaTorah with bracha before and after, of just one aliyah, does exist before, and the poil, therefore, we have a basis to allow a Kriyas HaTorah of just Parshas Zochor on the Shabbos afternoon. Okay. So I'm going on a little bit of feedback. I did discuss last week about a mezuzah with a walk-in fridge, and I mentioned the Sefer Chamudei Doniel. So someone sent me a few comments about this, that this idea that a mezuzah on a walk-in closet is required for walk-in closet. This Chamudei Doniel, there is in the back of the Torah Siddur, there's the Derech HaChaim, and on the Derech HaChaim there's a commentary of the Rebbe Avram David Lavut, the Rebbe's Zayda, the one who wrote the Sha'ar Koilel. So there he also brings the Chamudei Doniel. But meanwhile, he shows me a very interesting thing about the connection between the Shem Shin Daled Yud and the heker tzir. The tzir is the hinge, which is important for the mitzvah of mezuzah, and we use the heker tzir. So what you have here on the left, it's from a sefer called Shiur HaKadomis. It's one of the series of the Kisvei Arizal. Just let me fill you in. The Talmud Muvik of the Arizal is Reb Chaim Vital. His son is Reb Shmuel Vital. So Oma Shmuel Vital Hamatik. Shamati Chidush Noah. We have a posuk v'hoyo Shin Dalad Yud Betzorecha, which is a posuk in Iyov. And this could be, there's different ways of learning the translation of it. It could be that HaShem should be with you to protect you from your oppressors. But then he says you take the word seer, and you can find the word Shin Dalad Yud in the word seer, because take the word tzir, tzadik, yud, resh. So the last letter of tzadi is a yud, and the last letter of yud, of tzir, is dalad, and the last letter of what was it again? Of resh is a shin. So the last letters of the three of the milui of the three letters of tzir is the shem shin yud dalad, shin dalad yud, sorry. And so there we have shem shin dalad yud is in the Sofer Tavis of the word tzir. V'hoyo shin dalad yud v'tzorecha, that you'll have the tzir by the hinge of the door where the mezuzah is. There you'll have shin dalad yud. It'll protect you from your enemies. And that's the remes for the fact that we have the name Shin Dalad Yud written on the outside of the mezuzah. And that's also related to V'hoyo Shin Dalad Yud V'tzorecha, because the way the mezuzah is written, you have first Shema, and then V'hoyom Shemoya. But the V'hoyom Shemoya is inset. So the word V'hoy is inset, and it's on the other side of the parchment by that piece, by that gap. That's where the Shin Dalad Yud is to be written. So you have V'hoyo and Shin Dalad Yud. You've got the connection between the V'hoyo and the inside of the mezuzah, and the Shin Dalad Yud on the outside of the mezuzah. V'hoyo Shin Dalad Yud b'torecha. This should, it's at your hinge, and it should also protect you from enemies. Beautiful stuff. It doesn't change the halacha. I mean, we had this debate. This is an ongoing debate whether an entrance. So we have the minhag Chabad that we follow heker tzir as the criterion, unless it's the main entrance from the street. What about, and when the Rebbe were asked, so they said, how do you get into this room? If you're putting the mezuzah at the door, it goes out, you make it, how did you get into this? He said it came from fence still, going from the window and so on. So there were these, and so what about a room which has no window? So typically a fridge. A walk-in fridge will not have a window. And same thing with a air raid shelter, etc. You have these rooms which have a door opening outwards, and there's no window to go in. So do you go into a heker tzir or not? So this is a debate between Chabad Rabbanim. And in one of my Sforim, I wrote that I had visited the later Moshe Landau in his father's apartment in Rov of Anash, and I put this question to him, and he showed me a door underneath the stairs. There was a gap under the storage under the stairs, and the door opened outwards, and the mezuzah was on the left as you'd go in, as if you're going out from the cupboard into the house. Despite that, there are other Chabad Rabbanim who say that if there's no window, the Rebbe said, go for the window. If there's no window, then you have to put it on the right as you enter, because there's no suffix. When there's a window, there's a suffix which way, an element of suffix. My policy about this is that I'm not sure about minhag Chabad, and I do know that the Veltische minhag is to take the view to put it on the right as you enter. Therefore, that's my inclination. But as I say, this is an ongoing debate amongst Chabad Rabbanim. So when I'd said to put it on the right as you enter the fridge, there are those who'll say you put it on the left because according to Hackett. Just to clarify, it makes no difference whether the hinges are on the right or the left. The criterion is whether it opens inwards or outwards. Yeah. Let's move on. Right. I mentioned about the minimum amount for Matonis Lev Yoinim. We had a discussion about the size of a pruta. If you remember, we had a discussion about the price of silver having shot up, and therefore, actually, just someone asked me this past week, what would be the minimum amount for Matonis Lev Yoinim? They're having an event, and they want to give out coins for people to do Matonis Lev Yoinim. So I told them if you give 5 pence, two 5 pence coins, that would be enough. A nickel would actually not be enough according to current prices, because yeah. So now, I did mention that not everyone agrees that Matonis Lev Yoinim is enough to give a pruta. Some say it has to be something more substantial. They said that they never always said a pruta. So now take a look here from a Sikha, you can see from Tov Lamed Vav. There's a discussion in Achronim about the shiur of Monos Ishleri Eyu and of Matonis Lev Yoinim. This is when they just launched giving out Purim kits. And I mentioned, I think last week, they made 10,000 kits or something, and they put in 2 raisins and 1 biscuit, and the Rebbe was not very happy about them being such tiny amounts. There should be a kazayas or something. So the Rebbe in that sikha says, although there is a debate and discussion in Achronim, how much is the minimum for monos and for Matonis Lev Yoinim? So Matonis Lev Yoinim, the halacha kadas Rov of Anash. It should be a pruta. So he's acknowledging that there's a discussion, which I'd mentioned, but yeah, all right. So the majority consensus is that a pruta is enough. Because I mean, when it comes to Torah, to Nesina giving, a pruta is considered giving. So they are. It's just for Balabatim. I think it is important to share that yes, there are those, and many pastors say a pruta is enough, but you're allowed to give more also, of course. Ishtafi nidvas liboy, etc. Right. Then. What's going on here? About the kesher of the shelyad, and we have also about the reading of the maftir. So here you have on the thing which I sent out, I mentioned about the reading of the maftir. Someone told me that when it came to Simchas Torah, someone else had the aliyah for maftir, and the Rebbe didn't say the maftir, the haftarah with him. And he says he finds it very difficult to believe, because if you visualize the distance from the bima to where the Rebbe is standing, and to say that the Rebbe could hear from such a distance is difficult to believe. And okay, so they're questioning, and okay. Who had the aliyah on I said Rabbi Chadakov, that was Yom Kippur morning. Simchas Torah was Rabbi Karzanovsky. Neither of them in their older years for sure would project their voice terribly well, and so he finds it difficult to believe that the Rebbe just was relying on listening. About the back to front kesher of the shelyad, so yeah, so we had this discussion last week whether you do it a mirror image or an upside down yud, but a kosher yud, a proper yud. So this same gentleman sends me that it looks like he's a sofer. He says that there was a sofer called Rabbi Zilberman. So he held both ways a kosher, and so was the opinion of Rabbi Zalman Shimon, whereas Rabbi Zirkin would do it as like not the mirror image, but a proper yud, although it's upside down. And Rabbi Matlin, who was a sofer also in Crown Heights, who would check the Mashiach Sefer Torah regularly, so he would make a mirror image. So it looks like it's not a clear picture. But I did correspond about this with Rabbi Nachmanson. Rabbi Yehuda Leib Nachmanson lives in Eretz Yisrael, I think in Rehovot, and he's published a sefer called Bnei Iter. So he's a specialist all about lefties, and I asked him about this, and he said a very interesting thing. it comes to the letter tzaddik. Now, the letter of tzaddik is you've got a nun and a yud riding on top of it. But you ask Sofra, they'll tell you there's a nun and a tzaddik, a nun and a tzaddik sitting on it. Now, the minig al pi harizal is the yud on the back of the nun, which is I think the right yud of the letter tzaddik. That yud is a back to front. It's an image, a mirror image of a yud. So is showing me, whereas I've been challenging that a back to front yud is not a kosher letter, but you see that in the formation of the letter tzaddik, that yud is recognized as a yud, a mirror image, and he suspects that there were misnagdisher poskim who are quite upset about the back to front yud, and they pushed against it. Possibly they are equally the ones who are concerned about the back to front yud in the lefty tefillin. All right, it's an interesting thing. There is actually, just to finish off with this, someone put out a whole sefer to defend the back to front yud. I mean, the sefer is called Tzidkas HaTzadik. I've not seen the sefer, but I have read it. I mean, I've read about it, sorry. Okay, so that's what we have for tonight. Someone asked me, which I haven't answered, why is it today we had Zecher Zecher, and on Purim it's Zecher Zecher. Why is it order switched around? And so if anyone tells me the answer, I'll be happy to share it with you next week. Possibly next week we'll do the shiur a little bit later, perhaps another 15 minutes later, as Moshe Shabbos is creeping later and later. Meanwhile, I wish you a good tavoch, which is here Besudas Tovis, a Feilach Purim, and all the sonim on Mapola Gemura, and we should have a Geula Shlema.
Good shot. Good work.
Someone's asking, is 3 times 50 pence the usual shiur for Machatzis haShekel? So I think in London, in England, I think that's valid, yeah. Don't have to start using foreign currencies. This is the local currency. That's good. Call to